I'm Al Magaletta. I'm here at the NFPA conference. I am a member of the PAPA, Protecting All Protectors Alliance, and I'm here with Raul Angulo and Eric Lawyer, and who are both originally from Seattle. Raul is a former fire captain of Seattle, and Eric is a former fireman. And I have three questions, two of which are addressed to both of them. And the first question is, why are you here at the NFP conference? And secondly, why do you care about this building collapse? And finally, for Eric, what is PAPA asking for? And I'll start with Raul.
Okay, why am I here? Well, I was invited by PAPA, and I am the author of the recent edition of Engine Company Fireground Operations, 4th edition, which is published by Jones and Bartlett Publishing and in conjunction with NFPA. This is the most recent and comprehensive textbook on strategy and tactics for firefighting, and published to date. And there's a high-rise chapter in the book which caused me to really study the case studies in the United States as well as some around the world, like the Grenfell fire. And in my research of the case studies, I realized that to date there's been no structural collapse of any high-rise building as a result of fire. And so the book was published, and then I was contacted by PAPA. They were asking me about, what about the Salomon Brothers Building, which is Building 7 of the World Trade Center. I was aware that it did collapse. A lot of people don't. They only think that there's two collapses. You know, building, plane, collapse. But there was actually the third building that collapsed later on in the day. And so they turned me onto the website, and I was not familiar with the videos that were available, as well as the NIST study, which I did study and read. And I was not familiar with the study that came out of the University of Alaska. So after going through all that information, I had to yield to their concerns and basically agree. My consensus is that I don't agree that Building 7 collapsed as a result of fire. I realized that NIST did their speculation on modeling. There was no real hard evidence. It was all theorized, which makes the University of Alaska study so important, because they didn't agree with it and they did their own modeling and came up with a different conclusion, that this was not as a result of a single column collapse. So why is that important? It's important because in my new book, in the high-rise chapter, we haven't changed our high-rise strategy and tactics for the last 20 years, since September 11th. We're still setting up the command posts, usually in the lobby or at the fire control center of a building. We're using that control center because we're relying on the building features to help us control fire, whether it's through the sprinkler system, the ventilation systems, the HVAC systems. We're relying on the building to help us fight the fire. We're still setting up staging 2 floors below the fire floor. We're not evacuating entire buildings of their occupants. We're using the Type 1 construction safety ratings to execute our ability to protect people in place. For example, we may move them 5 floors below the fire floor. Certainly we're going to remove people above the fire floor above, maybe 2 floors above. Wherever there's smoke contamination, we're going to move them to a safer place. But our initial strategy is not to dump the building. And so these are still the current best practices for high-rise firefighting. So when you look at the NIST conclusion, which was based on the fire load of office fire load, that you can have a phenomenon that can collapse a single column and dump an entire building and collapse it, I'm sorry, I just can't buy it. And the problem that I have with NIST is I'm relying on them, because in my book I'm using the NIST UL studies and relying on the integrity and accuracy of the NIST experiments for residential construction in relation to modern fuels, and lightweight truss construction to cause us, and for me to write the book, to modify our strategy and tactics for residential fires using the evidence that was and recommendations that was provided by NIST. So unfortunately, I can't accept their recommendations or their conclusion on Building 7. It just doesn't compute. So I have skin in the game because I am writing and maintaining our strategy and tactics for high-rise firefighting. That's mainly why I'm here. Why is this building important, this particular building? Again, because there's so few real high-rise case studies in the United States, and none of them have resulted in a collapse. And the ones around the world, like the one in Spain, in Beijing, the Grenfell Tower, those were spectacular fires. None of them resulted in a collapse. The only building that we have that collapsed as a result of fire was Building 7. And so now that it's 20 years after, it's been a very visceral and emotional topic for a lot of people. They can't go there, but it's time to study this building and ask ourselves critical questions on why it collapsed. And so that's what we're here to discuss and start a discussion around that topic. So, Eric.
Thank you so much, Raul. And it's an honor to be here with you, and thank you for having the courage to share what you just shared. So 2 questions. Why are you here at the NFPA conference? I'm here because I care, and I know Raul's here because he cares. And anybody who really looks at this information, when you're able to work through the emotional side of what this might mean, which was really hard for me, I know most people care. Almost everybody I've ever talked to cares. That's why I'm here. This is the National Fire Protection Assn, which does care about firefighters. It cares about the public. And we, with PAPA, which is Protecting All Protectors Alliance, we care about people. We care about first responders and the public and the people they protect. So that's why we're here, is we care. We're a not-for-profit. No one's here because they're being paid to be here. Actually, most of us have paid to be here. So this is our main intention, is to get this information out to protect all people. And then why do I care about this building collapse? I care because, to me, if we do not take a stand for this as humanity, what it's saying is we no longer care about improving our buildings, improving our firefighting strategies, improving really anything. Because what we're saying is it's okay, because this is what happened. NIST admits, they admit themselves, you can go to their website, they admit they did this investigation on Tower 7, this building we're talking about, Salomon Brothers Building, with no physical evidence. If that's true, this is the first time ever in United States history a fire or a collapse at this level has ever been done with no physical evidence. If that's the case, nobody's been held accountable. Last time I checked, it's a federal crime to destroy physical evidence. NFPA 921, preservation of evidence of the fire scene, calls for you have to preserve that evidence until the investigation is complete and until all interested parties have had access to that same evidence. Well, at this conference, I won't say names, we'll just say we have met people who were sued by the Silverstein basically companies, that when they were sued because they were told their systems failed. Their systems did not fail, and according to them and according to me, my belief. So what it was this evidence or this investigation was done with no physical evidence. So how can they say that those things failed when they didn't use physical evidence? We can't prove that at all. So that's why this building's important. It's also important because I think we're at a time in humanity where it's we the people stand up and call out when an institution, a government institution or a corporate institution that's so massive and will not listen to the concerns of the people, that we the people make it clear we are no longer buying your information. It's kind of like the emperor has no clothes. We're not going to buy this as PAPA. Now, Raul, to be clear, has been invited here as a guest, so he's not a member of PAPA. He's our guest here. So I'm speaking for PAPA and myself. And I just want to see if there's anything else that's important for this building. I'd say it's important if you care about where the future's headed, about fire protection systems, about buildings, or just humanity in general. It's time for us to talk about this as adults, because right now NIST, they use no physical evidence. They refuse to follow the national standards for fire investigations, which call for the investigation of the use of explosives. NIST to this day refuses. They also refuse the existence of witnesses to explosions. If you go to our website at protectingall.org, you'll see witnesses. You can watch Calling Out Bravo 7. You can also see the interview we have on there with Barry Jennings. Barry Jennings was the deputy director of emergency services for the New York City Housing Authority. He was in Tower 7 along with the corporate counsel, Michael Hess. They were in Tower 7 before Towers 1 and 2 collapsed, and they reported explosions. Not only reported them, they were trapped for several hours from the explosions. So the fact that NIST is saying there were no witnesses, there were no audio recordings, and there's no physical evidence tells me that's an investigation I'm not going to take credibly. So your final question was, what is PAPA asking for? So what we're asking for as PAPA is we're not asking for trials, we're not asking for any of that stuff. What we're asking is common sense stuff. Right now, Grenfell fire in London, they had confusing opposing strategies happening. The reason why was the firefighters there had burned in images of buildings just collapsing, which they thought were due to fire. And they had a report from NIST saying that same thing. So when any new high-rise fire happens, that's going to happen with firefighters all over the world. Is this building just going to come down at free fall speed suddenly without any warning, or do we have time to operate and help rescue people? Which Raul knows from history, all the other high-rises have survived these collapse. They have not collapsed. So firefighters, we do have the time. Nothing has changed in that. What we have is a report that is bad. So we're asking the NFPA to put on in any of their codes and standards related to high-rise to have a disclaimer saying we are rejecting all the findings of NIST report on Salomon Brothers Building Tower 7. So we can make it clear to the firefighters and the fire professional community, this is I'll just call it a junk report, fake report, whatever you want to call it. That's what NIST report is. We are going to call things direct, and unless NIST can prove to me that they can't, because we have the witnesses, they say there are none. We can show you the witnesses. They can't disprove those witnesses other than saying they don't exist. So with me, I'm just honored to be here with these three gentlemen and with a lot of others from PAPA that are here, and the people that have had the courage to come to our booth that are people in positions of significant influence that even asked, how did you guys get in here? It is because it's time. It's time for us to look at this stuff. It's time to be adults about it. It's time to stop playing the political game and just going, we're people. We care. Your organization cares. Yours does too. Let's stop all the money BS. Let's stop all the political stuff and let's talk about this. So that's why we're here, and thank you both. And
I'd like to add something. Just one more thing. I think any sort of leadership, any sort of instruction at this level where lives are at stake, it relies on trust. Trust. I mean, people have to trust what I am saying in order to implement what I'm asking them to do as an author. And I'm relying on the integrity and trust of our organizations like, NFPA and NIST and UL and the building code people, International Fire Code, and all these other organizations. They're giving us information on how high-rise buildings are going to react in fire, how they're going to withstand fire. The information, the technical information, we're relying on that because they're not going to be the ones going into the building. We are, the firefighters. I don't have to be a structural engineer to understand it. I have to be able to trust that information from engineers because I'm the one going in, not them. My firefighters are going in, not them. So not being a scientist doesn't disqualify me because none of these scientists are going to go in there when this building is on fire to rescue people. So the trust of the information, that it's the veracity of the information needs to be spot on. It can't be tainted with biases. It has to be unbiased. And we have to rely on the physical science and not have political science interjected in the results because ultimately it's an issue of trust. What's that progressive collapse that they use?
Yeah. So NIST, as part of their claim of this sudden collapse, they say, Sunder does, it's a new phenomenon. It's the first time we have fire-induced progressive collapse. So what it's saying is a single point of failure can create a controlled like demolition type collapse.
And I never even heard of that term. After 20 years, if this was a significant report to be taken seriously, I mean, this information would have permeated training within the fire service in the last 20 years, and it hasn't. unlike the UL NIST information on structural firefighting residential structures, that has permeated the fire service training. It's at every conference, and my book is based on the recommendations. So I'm relying and trusting that the information I'm getting from UL and specifically NIST is reliable and accurate. And but unfortunately, I can't concur with the results of their report on Building 7. So it's really an issue of trust.
Yeah, thank you, Raul. Thanks, Al.
I'd like to thank both of you for coming all the way across the country to this convention, and not just me, but all the members of PAPA. We're very thankful that you're here, and really appreciate what you have to say. Thanks again.
Thanks for inviting us, Al.
Okay.
Thank you so much.